This is The Second Studio, hosted by the Architecture and Design Office fame. My name is David Lee, and with me is Marina Bordero-Ney. This week, our guest is Erin Stetzer.
Erin is the principal and founder of Erin Stetzer Homes in Houston, Texas.
Yes, and they are a general contractor specializing in custom homes. And with Erin, we, of course, discuss her story, how she became a contractor when she had not a whole lot of exposure to construction when she was a kid. I mean, a little bit, but not a whole lot. Her success story, and I think what a lot of you will appreciate is the grind and resilience and how she became successful. And the, well, you'll hear it, but the 10 years of being resilient and coming up with the business plan and all these types of things. It's very impressive work. And this conversation went by incredibly fast for us, which means that it was great. We talked about how they run their business as well. Somehow she reversed the conversation. She ended up asking us questions for 15 minutes about how we do things. And we talk about, estimating, contractors and architects working together, all different kinds of stuff.
Yeah, she's got a great energy. I do wish she was based in California because I feel like we need more people like that in general, more contractors like that, more designers and architects like that.
Yeah. And you should check her out on Instagram as well. She does a very good job of posting very educational and entertaining even clips fairly consistently about construction on the job sites that they have. And it's good things all around.
Yep.
Sponsors. Are you tired of juggling multiple pieces of software and struggling with spreadsheets that aren't made for the realities of design and architecture in 2023? Built by and for designers and architects, Programma's all-in-one suite of tools has everything modern studios need for every stage of a project. Mood boards, the world's best specification tools, procurement tracking, project management, and more. All smartly integrated and easily shareable and always up to date, reducing time-consuming double handling and costly errors. Share work in various formats from PDFs to client-friendly, up-to-date online dashboards. Join the ranks of leading studios using Programma today. Click the Programma link in our show notes to start for free. One of the easiest ways to get accurate existing conditions of houses is with an iPhone and iPad app called Canvas. Canvas is a tool we use on many of our projects. Instead of surveying the home manually, we simply scan it using our iPad, and Canvas processes the scan to produce accurate drawings and even 3D computer models. The file formats work with AutoCAD, ArchiCAD, Revit, Vectorworks, SketchUp, and others. It's extremely easy to use, really fast, and has been a huge benefit for us and our clients. Try it out by visiting canvas.io/SSP or click the link in our show notes to learn more.
If you're still using AutoCAD and separate 3D modeling program, then let me just tell you, stop that. Get with the times, people, and advance to a BIM computer program. The program we recommend is ArchiCAD. ArchiCAD leads the industry by enabling architecture and interior design firms around the world to 3D design. It's supported by innovative technology that expands as far as the imagination can stretch. As ArchiCAD continues to evolve with technological advances, architects can push that technology to their advantage while working in an accurate model. You can start your fully functioning free trial today by clicking the link in our episode notes.
This is The Second Studio with myself, Marina, and our guest, Erin. Here we go.
So I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, Midwesterner. I'm one of 7 kids.
Whoa.
I'm the oldest. Yeah. So oldest girl, so second in line. So I did a lot of babysitting and diaper changing and feeding, cereal to younger siblings and bedtime stories and all that good stuff. So one of 7 kids. I played a lot of sports growing up, and we can talk more about that, but ended up playing Division I basketball. As far as construction goes, I had no idea that I liked construction, but I will say when I was in 8th grade, my parents built their first home.
Oh.
And we actually didn't go on site with them because there were so many of us and we'd probably fall in the basement or something. So we didn't, I did not see a lot of the construction, but it was in a new neighborhood. And when I had time, I'd go running and I'd dribble my basketball, and then I'd stop in a house, and then I would go walk a frame. And it was really cool because there were Amish framers, so they used hammers. And so I just thought it was just a really neat process to look at and observe. So that was really my only exposure to construction as
neither
a
of your
kid.
parents were in construction or anything like that? Because the common story, of course, is how did you get into construction? Oh, my dad was a contractor. That's like the answer.
Yeah. So not at all. Zero, nobody in construction. My dad worked at a chemical company, and my mom raised 7 kids.
That sounds good.
It's a full-time job.
That's
right
a two.
there.
That's a 2 full-time job.
Yeah, 2 full-time job.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I will say, being a part of that system, I think what is helping me now is, I guess, the systems in play as a kid, right? So like dinner was at 5, you show up, you're a minute. I remember looking at the clock, and like back then it was the clock that would turn, the number would turn on the oven. And if you made it in at the turn, you were late and you're grounded for 2 weeks. So like all of these systems of like, do what you say you're going to do, or, there's a problem.
Yeah.
So
interesting. I will say also, it's funny because obviously, that we interview a lot of people, and we have a start time. It's a casual start time because we always have some chat before we hit the record button. But I'm always curious to see who arrives like a couple minutes before. In this case, it was 9 a.m. on our time. And I knew, I was like, she's going to be here at least like 3 minutes early. I just know it. And you were.
That's right. I better be ready.
Okay. So you basketball, Division I, which is super impressive. And then exposed a little bit to construction. And then you go to school for not for construction, for finance, I believe, right?
Yep. So went to Fairfield University, which is in Connecticut, and the East Coast is heavy into the financial world. So like New York City was an hour train ride from Fairfield. So I didn't know what I wanted to study at all. And we were really busy with basketball, right? So we're traveling all the time. We have mandatory study halls. We have, at that time, it was a Jesuit school. So the priest, would travel with us everywhere. And so it was very organized. And so my time was just sort of filled with all of that. So I really had no idea what I was going to do. And so, had the typical internship at Merrill Lynch, and then, interviewed at Lehman Brothers. And I was like, this is not for me. Like, so.
Were those in New York City or in Connecticut? Yes,
in New York City.
Oh,
so that was, right. So, but it was good. It was, internships. So got a taste for things, and then, graduated and decided I wanted to give professional golf a shot because I grew up golfing too.
Wow.
Yeah. Worked at a country club. Definitely learned the value of service and showing up with a smile and being reliable, but also, really trying to make it on the Nike Mini Tour. And I didn't. I slept in my car, couldn't make any money, but it was fun.
Wow. So you're did you think that when you were playing basketball in college that you would continue afterwards?
No, I wasn't that good. Like college for me was about paying for school, getting into a good school. But I think that was it. Plus, I have to admit, like, there's a level of burnout, right? Because it's a lot of practicing, and I wouldn't have made it in the pros.
I'm just curious because I was not an athlete in my younger days and throughout college, but my sister was. And I know that for a lot of people who are very dedicated to their craft as an athlete, sometimes when it finishes, there's kind of a void that's left because they're used to practicing as much as you're talking about, right? But then you pivoted into golf.
Yes, that's right. So pivoted into golf. But what I'm realizing now, like everything I'm doing like my entire day right now, especially in construction, runs at that pace and runs at that level of systems and level of expectations and wanting to be in the top 1%. Like it's all aligned. Like I just didn't know it or see it.
Right. There's probably an intense amount of discipline, which is a now that I think about it, also a trait that I would want any of the contractors we work with to have, because it's such a complicated field and complicated thing to achieve, to build these custom houses, that if you're a contractor and you have knowledge but you're not disciplined, it doesn't make for a good team player.
No. And I think you hit the nail on the head. It is not an individual sport. It's a team sport. And for sure, and a lot of, as a contractor, like, you walk into a project and it's all about solving problems with a smile, all of it, and communicating and creating action items and closing the loops and doing the hard things well, even though it's just hard. Like, there are plenty of times, you could line 10 contractors up and ask to walk a house. And I worked in the production home building world, and some people choose to see something and address it. And some people choose to glance over it and keep walking. And so I think it's, one of those things in sports, like, it's in my face. I see it, address it. If I fall down, I'm going to get back up and it's going to be fine.
Right.
And we're going to fix it.
Right.
So just that mentality.
What is the production home? Is that a spec house?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So production. So, but then I finally did start building, right? So after golf and whatever. So I worked for David Weekley Homes, and it's so in Texas, we have these suburbs, and there'll be like 100 different homes or plots of land, and there'll be 5 floor plans.
Gotcha.
And right. And so we would just build these homes one after the other. And so, so they're just neighborhoods of homes, at least here in Texas.
Gotcha. Okay. We certainly have those in California. I know exactly what you're talking about. So how did you make the decision to work for David Weekley, again, go into construction after golf?
So this is funny. So then I did work a little bit in corporate America, and I was traveling. I was transferred to Houston. And I didn't know, I knew my aunt and uncle, 2 people, and they were hosting a Thanksgiving dinner. And I met, he's now my husband, Alec, but Alec was at the table and he was a builder. And I was like, well, I don't know anyone, so let's just like hang out. So we did. And I'd do my sales thing, and then, we'd have time to just spend on our own. And I would just like catch up with him. And I'm like, I want that job. Like, that's it. That's what I want to do. I did have a goal to never, ever have to wear nice shoes. Like, I always wanted to wear running shoes when I work. And so like that met the criteria. So, so he was a builder. He was a builder for like 1.5 years, 2 years tops. He did not like it.
Oh, it's funny.
Yes. So that's how I ended up getting into building.
So was there, based on what you can recall, was there anything specific about what you learned about what your to-be husband did as a contractor, as a builder, that you found so alluring, where you knew that this was going to be a path?
Yes. I liked the idea of
wearing running shoes.
wearing running shoes. I liked the idea of showing up every day and learning something new, which is construction, and they have this great program. I like the idea of being outside and on the move. Like, my entire life was, especially in sports, is you're learning and moving. Like, that's what you do all day. So I liked that idea. I love the idea of immediate feedback, whether it was good or bad. But I loved the idea of like, today, this wall is sheetrock. Tomorrow, we see a baseboard. Okay, but wait, what's going on with this baseboard? Why isn't it level? Right. So there's always a constant getting better to the job. So I like that part. And then the other part too, I love is the people doing the work. I so admire the time that they've put into their craft. And it's just so much fun to huddle up with these individuals. And a lot of, half the time they they don't think they can do something, and they just, right. And so it just takes a few people to support, like, we can do this. Like, let's just figure this out. And just like to see the growth there with people, because people like to stay in their box as good as we get, as good as, I mean, like the box is comfortable. And so it's fun to see, a little bit of stretching every day.
I like that. I think you're right that even the folks who, like yourself or the people that you have as subs and as craftspeople, everyone has, I think it's human nature to want to stay within the box. And it's sometimes a challenge to fight that. But I think, to your point, that's when it's very useful and necessary to have good people around you to positively push you outside the comfort zone on certain days, especially. But it isn't, even for us, we don't do construction, we're architects, but there's always that underlying feeling of, but this is more comfortable if I do it this way. And then you have to remind yourself, no, but it's not really what we're here to do.
Yes. Yeah. And I will, like, the level of architects that we're exposed to, I mean, truly, when I think about how much I get to learn, and like even the depth of knowledge in each of their own specific expertise, we're exposed to these great architects and they all think so differently. And like the amount of information, like we just get to be a part of and watch the architects maneuver and listen and replan and work through something with a carpenter or even a painter, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just like being a part of all of that forward movement is like, every day is an awesome day. Like literally, it's like every day is so happy.
I was going to ask
like
you.
The only builder I know who would say that.
I'm super excited. This is great. We might have to move to Texas just so we can work together.
It's in the Kool-Aid here.
Well, jumping forward, based on what you just said, Miranda, do you ever do work outside of your local region, or is that really hard to do as a contractor?
So as a contractor, there are companies that do that work outside of the area. For very special projects, we will go about 90 minutes or so, because that's where the trades, the people that we work with, are willing to go.
Yeah.
But the other part of our business is consulting, and so in that respect, I do get to work with people outside of Texas. So we do consulting. We also do virtual consulting, because for like industry professionals or anyone in home building, because there's a real thirst for trying to understand this whole process. If we can help, like you're doing with your podcast, if we can help in some way try to identify an issue quickly or align a team with some insight, then we're doing our part on this planet.
I love that. Yeah. And we're in alignment on that for sure. As you know,
yes.
Well, I spent a lot of time talking to, I guess you would call them potential clients or folks who are trying to do a project and they've never done it before and they have a million questions. So we'll spend the time to answer them and point them into the right directions. And I always tell them, I say, look, if we work together, that's great. But if we're not the right fit, either on our side or your side, it's totally fine. I just want to make sure you understand generally the rules of the game here. So whatever kind of path you go down, it's at least in the right direction. Because as you know, so many people, when they don't know anything about this whole process, and it is a complex process, these projects take a couple of years. And let's face it, a lot of contractors practice in different ways. A lot of architects practice in different ways. And it's very easy for a client who's never gone through the process to end up going down a path that causes a lot of headache because they just didn't know and they weren't able to compare apples to apples when choosing the right professional and all these other things. So I'll agree with you. As long as as long as the people we're speaking with end up going down a way where the project ends up successful, then I'm happy. Because it bums me out when we frequently hear about clients who are partway through a project and they've had a really tough time. It makes me, my head shakes.
Exactly, because we know the difference, and and we learn every day. And I love your model, which is give first. Like that's the name of the game. Like give first. Like if you notice something, help guide them. Which is exactly what you guys are doing.
Trying to. And I do want to talk about the consulting in a little bit, but sticking sort of with the narrative. So you worked at David Weekley for about 3 years and you broke off and started your own company. And I'm always curious to know what leads a person to do that, because it is very different. Working successfully as ex-professional for another company is extremely, extremely different from having your own business. So how did that transition take place?
Okay, so when I started at David Weekley, my intention was to learn. So, and I also knew that we wanted a family, and so, part of my thought process was, I've always been an entrepreneur just through sports. Like in the summer times, I would actually, like sophomore year in high school, I would show up every day to play, pick up basketball with all the guys. Nobody forced me to do that, but I knew if I want a scholarship, then this is what I need to do. And I would get beat up and nobody wanted me there and I had to earn it. And, broke my ankle a few times, my nose, like it's just, so like that part of me is entrepreneurial. Like my goal is to get a scholarship. I'm going to show up and do this. So when I started with David Weekley, I knew at some point that I was going to start a business, but I need to learn and be trained and give them all I've got. I mean, like when I did a great job for them because they have a great training program, and if you show up and do great work, then it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah. So what was your role when you were there? Were you like on site using the hammer and like framing houses? Were you managing projects? Like what were you exposed to all of the types of positions and trades? What was the training like?
Okay. So I was hired as a superintendent. So, so I was the one, doing the scheduling, hiring the trades, building the home, checking the work. And I reported to a project manager. So I was the one out there, kind of orchestrating everything.
Yeah,
that's a great position to be in.
So when you first got the description from your future husband of what a contractor does, and then you got like to, actually work on a construction project, were you surprised by anything or it was kind of like what you were expecting? Also, you're a woman, so I'm not sure what it was, again, I don't know, back then, being a woman, being the super and telling all of the guys on site to do like whatever they had to do.
That's a good question.
Yeah. So luckily, in high school, I had gone through that kind of feelings being hurt, but I have a goal.
Yeah.
And so that was really, really good training. And then even in college, we played guys all the time. So I just had a lot of exposure to earning my keep. And so luckily when I got into building, I noticed it. Like, here's a funny story. There's, do you remember the walkie-talkies, Nextel walkie-talkies?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so it's like a walkie-talkie, but kind of a phone, and everybody hears everything. Okay, so so like there was this one guy, and he was probably in his 60s, and he would radio in and he would say Irwin, and I'm like, Irwin? That's a guy's name. I'm like, Irwin? and he kept calling me Irwin, and I'm like, no, it's Erin. Irwin, we got to report on a foundation. I got to talk to you. Blah blah blah. And my husband, so I was just used to it. I was just like, it doesn't matter. I have a job. I need to get an answer, so I'm going to get the answer. I don't care what he calls me. And my husband was standing next to me, and he goes, what? Like, what did he just say to you? And now he literally calls me Erwin to this day, Alec, my husband. So to answer your question, yeah, like, I think luckily none of that really affected the way I thought. I was surprised. Here are some surprises. I was surprised that, like, when somebody said they were going to do something and they repeatedly didn't do it or made something up or lied, like, that was so foreign to me. I was like,
Yeah.
and like, there's this thing where people get used to that response in building.
Yeah.
And I was like, I cannot operate like this. Like, we're not going to do it this way. And so, but then, you know, I think we had a level of respect for each other, and then they would show up because I was like, don't lie to me. Just tell me the truth. I can handle the truth.
Yeah.
But if you're not going to be here, just tell me.
Yeah.
And it was like a foreign conversation. Now, granted, this was like 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's still the same, but that was definitely a surprise, like, to me. Like, how do you get any work done if people aren't telling you the truth? You can't do anything.
Yeah. we were laughing, but also frustrated about that the other day with more with like consultants we work with, when people just don't follow through. And I'm always left perplexed because I think probably the same as you. I just don't comprehend how that works. I mean, sometimes people are busy and they forget stuff. That's not what I'm talking about.
Right. That's different.
Yeah. And others also, I do wonder, I'm like, but how do you even stay in business? How do you even get clients if this is the way you do things, you know?
I know. It's a good question. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know.
It's not us though.
Yeah. Not us.
So when did you make the decision of going on your own?
Yeah. So then I got married to Alec, and, you know, and I was pregnant, and then I still wasn't sure, like, even to the day our daughter was born, I wasn't sure whether I was going to go back to David Weekley or start something new.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had like 6 weeks off to just soak it in and try to figure things out. And just, that was the point. You know, Alec was working, so we had dual income. So
yeah.
I took a little bit more time and thought through, okay, if I were to start a business, how would it look? And so ultimately that was the turning point where, you know, I wanted to figure out how I could be, you know, we have 5 kids. So I wanted to figure out how I can, I don't think balance is the right word, but like spend as much time with my kids as I do with the business. And that's why for me, it took a long time to grow, because I wanted to have the alignment
like
the entire way.
Integration. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. So was it your first kid was born and that's when you were making the decision to go off on your own, or was it the
Wow, that's
okay.
bold. Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yes.
That's encouraging probably for a lot of people listening, to be honest.
And it made sense, right? Because for us, Alec had an income and I could try to figure this out. And so it was just, you know, a bathroom remodel and then a kitchen remodel and then, you know, just little things, you know, bit by bit. And then of course built a few spec homes. And now this is like 2008, the market crashes.
Great.
Yeah. Right. And, right. And so we had 2 homes on the market. We had drained through our savings trying to keep these, you know, paying these loans for the homes for about a year. We had just built a home and
wow.
Yeah. And so that was a point in our lives where, and we had just had our 4th kid, like 6 months before that. So like, it was a lot of stress. Alec was laid off from his job. Like, it was just like the perfect storm.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So we have 4 kids, drained through our money, built a house, sold that house, finally sold the spec homes. Alec doesn't have a job. We go buy a smaller house and we're like staring at each other like, okay, is this what, having your own business looks like? Like, how do you get out of this? And that was the point in time where, so before I met Alec, he had cancer. So he had stage 4 cancer. So he had seen real life flash in his eyes. Like, so he was very clear. And he said, here's the thing. I said, what do you want to do? Like, do you want to go back to work or what? And he said, Erin, when you look at life, like really look at life or death, you're really clear. And he said, I want to be with the kids. So we said, okay, great. We need to put a plan together here. Because at that time we had been, splitting duties. And then, so we came up with a plan where, all right, I'll focus on the business. He wants to be with the kids, and then my schedule changed too. So I started waking up at 2:45 in the morning. I would go get my workout. This is good for moms. I would go get my workout, or dads, get my workout in, get some work planned. Then the kids are up and moving, get them, Alec could bring them to school. And then I wanted to be home, by 3:30 or 4 when the kids were home, to be a part of everything. So all of that, like you said, David, was integrated, but we tweaked our family setup or system to fit this mold, and it's working. So
that's a crazy story.
Wait, so what time did you have to go to bed to wake up at 2:30 in the morning?
I was so I don't remember a lot. That
might be a good thing.
That's fair.
Yeah, but it would be after the kid. We tucked the kids, bedtime stories, tucked the kids in, and by then they had bedtimes, I think around 8. So I'd be in bed between 8 and 9.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's like a solid 5.5, 6 hours, which is not too bad, but still that's hardcore. No.
Yeah. Well, it's not like architecture school where you guys keep the lights on all night.
There's definitely a severe lack of sleep that happens in
only
architecture
for those
school.
who don't have systems.
Yeah.
Not everybody. I only did like a few all-nighters like the last year of school, but otherwise I was like super organized, like schedules, like to-do list, and super disciplined. And I had a pretty healthy 4 years of architecture.
I think you and
school.
Erin have that in common. I did not get that gene.
Well, I've heard you talk too about big firms versus small firms. Then, if you're at a big firm and the project manager, you're forced to do an all-nighter because it's part of the process, that process.
Still, I mean, that's such an incredible story. So the one thing I was wondering, so if you try and remember back, do you think that what you achieved would have at all been feasible had you not set that schedule in place? That schedule and that kind of work-life integration plan that you guys made?
Yeah, it definitely, that plan gave, at least for Alec and I, clarity on it's, when you work really, really hard and sometimes you're like, what's it for?
Yeah.
Well, this was the opposite. Like, we got really, really clear on, we're going to work really hard on our family, and we're going to work really hard on basically our roles. Like, I've got to get this business off and running. He's got to make sure there's food on the table, and carpool. And so it became so much easier to be tired and not care, or to get that, budget turned in by midnight for something. It just became easier to work really hard.
Yeah, interesting.
How long do you think it took for that system to start like paying off? Like, when did you see kind of like your luck show up and things to pick up?
10 years at least.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So 2008 to 2018 ish.
Yep. It was just, how much can I learn from people? How can we make sure that the kids' needs are being addressed? Like, when they're little, it's immediate.
Yeah.
really just making sure I'm meeting the right architects. Like the whole thing in my head is top 1%. I want to be with the top 1% of whatever I'm doing. So a lot of like going to architects' offices and say, listen, you don't know who I am because I'm not in all the magazines. And if there's something I can help you with, I'd love if you could, send it my way and I'll give you feedback. Like I want nothing. I just want to give you something for feedback. Mm-hmm. And so, we just did that. Like we bid on projects and totally understood that it was a matter of just putting information in front of people. Mm-hmm. And then what we found for all the builders out there is because of that effort, like we're all human. So, I mean, think of how many times you're like, gosh, that person like keeps showing up and they actually like are doing the work. Like we should throw them a bone. Yeah. Just to see. And that's what happened. So they would, an architect I wanted to work with would say, hey, we have this remodel. It's not a huge project, but would you be interested? Mm-hmm. And I would say, yes, let's go. So, and then, right, we get a chance to work together. And now we have this relationship where, we're learning a ton from the architect and the designer, and they're happy because we're actually creating results that they want. We're reading the plans. We're asking about details, right? Like all the things that you should be doing.
The plans,
yes, that's a big deal, as you know. Like, not everyone reads the plans.
Yeah.
It always amazes me. I'm like, do people think that we just draw plans to make ourselves like happy? Like, I would be perfectly fine drawing less things, honestly.
I know. So I have a sincere appreciation for you guys because. Here's the thing, like in building, it's all new, right? There are things we've never done every day. And to have a roadmap and a guide from an expertise from people who know how this works. And all we have to do is follow the roadmap. Like that's it, right? It's on the plans.
Yeah.
So anyone listening to this, please read the plans.
Right. Because you are creating the details and they work and you're open to conversations that maybe it's interesting when trades, we huddle up at a team meeting and, there'll be a roof flashing detail and the roofer might bring up something a little different. Mm-hmm. And it's really nice when architects are like, I didn't see it that way. Yeah. Like, maybe we should look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of my favorite parts of the process, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah. Because it's, you gain more experience as you go on, but it's getting to talk to the subs or the people who are doing like the very specific work, like day in, day out, and have done this thing, this eave detail, 100 different ways on 100 different projects. I haven't done it 100 different ways on 100 different projects because we have what we do. And by getting to talk to someone who knows their craft really well it's just helpful. And if it ends up being the same as what we drew, great. If it ends up being different, then that excites me even more, honestly. Because then I'm learning something. It's great. Cool,
Yeah, that's awesome.
The 10-year timeline is such an intense thing to hear, and also I think, as I said before, encouraging for a lot of people who have their own businesses. And then, of course, I was thinking, okay, 2008, 2018, then pandemic hits. It seems like every 10 years there's some kind of, pretty much on the clock every 10 years there's something that happens with the economy or otherwise.
Yeah, you're right. That is how it works. Yeah, but the longer, it's just like your business, the more resilient you are, the better luck you have.
Yeah.
The more conversations you have and more opportunities that show up. So I'm a huge believer in just, keep learning, keep growing, keep helping. Things tend to work out.
Nice. Was there between that timeline of, when everything crashed in 2008 to let's say where you are now, in all of that time, was there like one or a couple projects that stand out in your mind as being sort of a turning point, where when you either were awarded the contract or maybe completed them, you felt like, okay, this is significant and this could signify us turning a corner and starting to do consistently, bigger, better work?
For sure. Yeah. So there was one project, and it was the architects are out of Seattle,
Mm-hmm.
Suyama Deguchi Peterson, and they specialize in Japanese contemporary.
Oh.
And so I got a call out of the blue, someone who had heard of us. I had no business having the conversation, but they were willing to take the risk and talk to me. And so we reviewed the plans, and I was like, I am so out of my league. Like, I have a lot to learn. Like, what is Sushugi Ban? Like, that's burnt wood. How do I do, like, I don't know. Like, the builder in me is like, I have to understand this to be like, I just have to understand it, period. So what I'd said was, this is a game changer. Can we fly out to Seattle? Let's meet with the architects. I have to go, like, can we walk a few homes so I can pick up the details that may not be on the plans? Like, I have to understand,
Yeah.
Like what the intentions are when they're not drawn. So we did it. We flew out to Seattle, spent a few days there, walked a few homes. I learned a lot, and it gave me sort of an understanding of how the project wants to move forward. I recruited all new trades. The trades I was using were not capable of building this. We burned our own wood because at the time you couldn't buy Sushugi Ban. Now you can, Delta Millworks in Austin, you can buy it. So we got our torches out and we learned how to burn the wood, and we're rushing, like, me and the homeowner, right? Like, this is like so crazy. So that was the turning point where, like, I learned what construction administration was from an architect. I learned that if I make a phone call to an architect, the owner is going to get a nice fat bill. I learned that everything I do and say has meaning, like, as opposed to, sort of like, I'm going pro now. I was a rookie before, but this is pro. So yes, that was the turning point where I was, like, exposed to a whole new level of standards and expertise. And that's when I was like, okay, when I say top 1%, that's what it means. So I need to go find those architects in Houston and those designers in Houston.
Interesting. And now a little break for our show sponsors. If you're starting to laser scan your renovation projects for accurate as-builts, you'll want to hear this. Imagine that you've been awarded a big project, but not surprisingly, your client hands over wonky CAD drawings from 17 years ago. No worries. Meet Integrated Projects, or IPX for short. IPX is a scan-to-BIM platform that converts your 3D point cloud file, which is produced from any major LiDAR camera, into standardized BIM and CAD files. The best part is that they lay out the price and turnaround time instantly. That means starting your interior renovation project on the 50-yard line with an accurate set of drawings in 3D and 2D. Click the IPX link in our show notes to launch the platform for free. We are supported by Enscape. Enscape is a fast and easy-to-use real-time visualization and VR tool for the AEC industry. Enscape is not a standalone application. Instead, it's a plugin, which makes things much easier. It plugs into Revit, SketchUp, Rhino, ArchiCAD, and Vectorworks. With Enscape, you can create realistic renderings, 360-degree panoramas, and videos, and you can even immerse clients in VR to give them a deeper understanding of their building. Enscape is used by more than 500,000 monthly users worldwide from over 150 countries. So if you want a fast and user-friendly real-time visualization experience, then click on the Enscape 3D link in our show notes.
The Second Studio podcast is made possible by support from Autodesk.
Autodesk has been part of the design conversation since 1982, providing the tools that help architects around the globe imagine and create beautifully designed, memorable buildings that people love and admire. Autodesk supports the work of the Second Studio, bringing the architecture community together, sparking curiosity, and leading vibrant interviews with the industry's visionaries and thought leaders.
The Second Studio works hard to carry the architecture conversation forward, and Autodesk is proud to contribute to this podcast. If you want to learn more about Autodesk, click the link in the episode notes.
That brings up another question, which is, so if you're you or a hypothetical you is a builder who does only spec houses, kind of like the neighborhood you were describing. That's one lane. That's one way of practicing, and it's a recipe, right? But if you do custom homes, it's a very different thing. And so I think that what people don't realize, like the average client, when they're trying to build a custom home or they want to build one, they don't realize how much new things happen in that process for the contractor and for the architect. As much as we have our experience and we have our inclination toward certain styles or ways of executing things, like there's a lot of new stuff that happens in every project that we just have to figure out, as you put it. So I guess my question is, how do you, as a builder, convince or convey to an architect or client that you should be hired to do something you've never done before? Because that's kind of the game in a sense.
It is. And, part of that 10 years that we talked about, what I learned during that process, when I was bidding on projects, I would spend like 40, 50 hours, and we still do, on bidding a project that we weren't even going to get. But it put me in touch with the right trades. I forced myself to go have these conversations with the right trades, meaning they understand the kerf detail, kerf jam detail, right? They, mechanically, the HVAC systems are sheet metal ductwork and variable speed units. And so I was doing all of this like top notch, like how can we be the best and provide the best? And my numbers came in like $1 million over like these other builders. But it was very hard to, and I'm like, I'm sticking to that model because this is what that house deserves. And that's what they're asking for, because I've talked to the architects.
Yeah.
And what I learned was, I just have to keep showing up, telling the truth. Not telling the truth, but I have to keep showing up with a price that is aligned with the expectations.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to do. And that's part of that 10 years is, I'm like, I'm not playing that game. I'm just not. I know the game.
Yeah.
But then, then you start building a few homes, and then people know that when we're having a conversation, it is a potent, factual conversation.
Right.
Yeah. So I forget the question.
I don't either, but I like the answer.
Okay. All right. We'll run with it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Because one of the things that we're always conveying to clients as well is that, if you choose to bid out a project to 3 to 5 or whatever number of contractors, there are what would appear to be obvious advantages to that for a client. But the reality is it just doesn't work, because it's almost impossible for two bids to be, that's, how do I put it, like accurate to the same degree. It's very, very improbable, even if you have two contractors who are trying. And the bidding process of finding or hiring a contractor, I don't care for, because obviously what everyone looks at first is a number, and they are concerned with other factors with making a decision, but the number tends to be the most important thing. And I'm like if you go with the lowest they're lower than everyone else by significant margin for a very good reason, a very bad reason. But I mean, like that, there's a reason for that. And if someone's $1 million over, it could be that they've just done their homework more accurately. And it's not because they're just charging an extra $1 million for funsies. It's because they probably looked through the drawing set more thoroughly than anyone else, to be honest.
So I'd love to hear how both of you actually love to set a project up for your clients. Like, what do you find to be the best recipe?
Yeah. So in the last number of years, and actually at this point, almost I think every single one of our projects, we don't have clients bid out to different contractors. We encourage them to bring on a contractor from the beginning to perform pre-construction services. And you probably know, but basically it means that the contractor is available and accessible to provide estimates maybe like once or twice during each design and drawing phase, and then schedule estimates, updates rather, and then constructability feedback throughout design and documentation. And the idea is that, you're assembling the team earlier. It also means when it comes time to get the final price of the house based on the final CDs, the construction documents, that final number is going to be fairly close to what we expect it to be, because we've had maybe half a dozen estimates leading up to that point. Instead of traditionally, it was the architect doing all of the drawing, all the designing, sometimes all the permitting and all the construction documents. And then only after that, you send it out to, like I said, the 3 contractors. And it's only at that point does everyone, meaning everyone on the team, including the client, realize what the price is. And it just never works, right? The number is always too high. And a lot of projects die because of that. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from clients, colleagues, and other people like, oh, so-and-so neighbor, they bought this property, they spent tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands on the architect, and then they realized they couldn't afford the project. And that's just a silly thing. So pre-con is kind of... is basically the best that we found to work with the contractor and ensure that projects are that it also helps them run much more efficiently in construction, to be honest, because it's just
I mean, they get familiar with the drawings and the design throughout rather than having to look at a thick set and try to understand like what was the intention behind this. Like, we've made the decisions together throughout the process rather than us architect doing our thing, and then here, contractor, here's the set, good luck, go build it. Like, it's more of a collaboration, and sometimes contractor will have great suggestions like, oh, maybe we could use that material instead of this, it'll be easier, be simpler, be faster. And those are things that, we might not have been aware of. So there's a lot of pros. I think it just makes sense.
And I'll add real quick that it also doesn't mean that client is stuck to using that contractor for construction. Obviously, the client can fire anybody at any point in time. And usually with a lot of the pre-con contracts, it's understood that if the client wants to pivot and bid it out or use someone else when it comes time, they can do that. It rarely happens because you've built trust, and oftentimes it's a contractor that we've recommended. And then the last part of it is that we perform pretty serious construction administration, and those are the key things. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So, but again, it's a lot about educating, I think, the client as to the do's and the don'ts and the benefits, because I think we found too, and I'd be curious to hear from you, that a lot of folks think that, especially honestly, some of the really smart clients think that they can somehow like hack the system, and they found the magic shortcut to making it, 15%, 20% faster and cheaper with high quality. And I don't believe that shortcut exists. It's about just being diligent, responsible, honest, thorough, detailed, all the like kind of classic stuff you're supposed to do at a high level. Then that's when it runs the most efficiently. But there's no, I haven't found any kind of magic solution to just.
And we usually talk budget super early on with the client, because you're right, it is about setting expectation. We tell them we could be very creative. We can work on like small budget and make it interesting, and big budget, but still be super efficient. But if you want something that's really expensive to build, but you want to spend a third of that, we can, change dirt into gold. Like there is just so much creativity that we can use before we don't have the superpower to make that transformation. So it is a bit, about, just being honest with your expectation and open in the communication. Like if the client is withholding information about how much they really want to spend, that's not going to work because we need to know. Mm.
So what do you do when a client comes to you? And so like what I've learned is it could be a billionaire and there's always a budget.
Yeah.
Or, right. And then there truly is like a budget. Mm-hmm. How, when people come to you and you have that budget conversation and really, you're creating this home on paper and the vision, how do you address the budget? Like if they say, "Oh, I want to spend X amount per square foot," mm-hmm. like how do you guys handle that from the start?
Yeah, so we have a questionnaire and we have conversations with them before we do any drawing to get a sense of, as best as we can, their actual goals and how much fuel money we have for the project. But mm-hmm. As long as it's within the United States and it's not like a completely foreign country, we have a pretty good sense of cost per square foot as a baseline. So if someone tells me, the other question we started asking is, if you were to think of this house you're going to build as a car you are about to purchase, what kind of car would it be? Now, it's a great question, except for the fact that everyone says they want like a Ferrari, but in reality, they're only willing to pay Honda prices. But we try to understand like their goals. And then if they tell me, yes, I want a house that is going to be like the things I see in the magazines by these offices or this Ferrari level house, and my budget is $500 a square foot, and I have a hillside property in Los Angeles, then I'll say it's not possible. I wish it was. I wish construction wasn't so expensive. I get it, but it's not possible. And you might find some builders.
You almost do not want it to be possible because it probably wouldn't stand for very long.
Well,
yeah,
well, that's the thing.
That's right.
It's like I'm sure someone would do it for that price, but it's probably not the route you want to go.
Yeah, no, and we'll tell them that too. Yeah. So like you will if you try hard enough, you'll find a contractor who would tell you they can do it for that price. But I'll tell them if it was my house, I would not trust that contractor because I know enough of that particular city or just in general across the United States. It's not going to work if it's new construction in that case. So at the very beginning, it's just having a rough understanding based on comps. And then as we get further, that's when we engage a contractor. And look, I mean, the other thing too is pre-con doesn't solve all the problems. It's not a perfectly smooth process, and we're not getting consistent, estimates we're not getting estimates once every week during design. There's always a little bit of, you have to put something down on paper that's, solid. It has to be something in order for a contractor to give some estimates, in order for a client to know whether or not it's worth the price. So there's always a little bit of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 3 forward, 1 back in throughout the process, even with pre-con. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And when you're, let's just call it a pricing set, when you're issuing a pricing set, do you put things in like sort of things that let people know this is a higher end home, like float-in recess cans, or like, do you give, like, what would be some of the major notes or give people a sense of direction on level of expectations?
Yeah, we definitely know what those are. It does vary from project to project. It's not necessarily written and documented in the set itself, although that's kind of interesting. I've never thought about doing that.
If we use like specific details that we already have in mind, during schematic design, like we'll for sure put a note. If there is like specs of things that we know that has to be in the project and it's a little bit more expensive than typical, then we will put that in the schedules and let them know. We also do 3D very early on, so there is 3D images part of the pricing set. we put a label. Those are just for visual references. Do not use that to build or do any takeoff from, but just so they can kind of get a better understanding, because again, 2D drawings aren't always showing everything, and it's a kind of a tricky, brain exercise to go from an RCP to a plan to a section to a site plan and understand what happens in between those sheets. So 3D is a big part of it. And when we are on board a contract, or even just for pre-con, the first conversation, usually we do kind of a little bit of a few meetings with the client, and we show reference images of, maybe the design direction we're thinking of going in, or the level of architecture that we're trying to accomplish. And we share that with the contractor, just so we're kind of on the same wavelength. We're not going for, a very cost-effective remodel of a bungalow. This is what we're aiming for, just so everybody is on the same page.
Yeah, I bet. I don't know. Your question is a good one. I think that what we generally do also during the, let's say, schematic or design development, when there is a lot of heavy 3D in both of those phases, we will point out to the client and say, this is great. This might be a thing that needs to be revised slightly depending on what the numbers come back. And we also know at that point, we know the clients really well. So we also know which things they're not going to budge on. And it varies. Sometimes people are like, I will spend an extra large amount of money to have this door and window system from this company, which for other folks, they would be like, that's crazy. I'm not spending that amount of money on the window package. But for them, it makes sense. And some folks, it's like, I want to spend a lot of money, kind of, I wouldn't say disproportionate, but a lot of money on this one item, like concrete floors. And so, yeah, I don't think we've ever really documented though, in the pricing set, which things would be changed. We just kind of have a list kind of in the back of our minds based on understanding the client, which things would get cut out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just curious because sometimes we go through these exercises, like the pre-construction agreement, and let's just say the pricing comes in at whatever 10 million, and the client certainly has the capability to fund the project, but it may not make sense for them based on let's say they're going to keep the home for 5 years, so they say, hey, we need to pull back about $1.5 million. And so I was curious if there were, I think you answered it, things you would remove from the project easily to find $1 million.
Yeah. So we do keep that in the back of our minds throughout the entire process. It's not the central way that we design, but we have a pretty good guess of okay, there's always in our view in particular, I think there's a hierarchy to the design itself, and there are elements that are critical that have to exist for the sake of the design, and they're not necessarily the most expensive things. Sometimes it just means that it's alignment, this datum must continue across. That doesn't really cost a whole lot, but it must exist. We cannot get rid of that thing, otherwise, in our view, it all falls apart. So yeah, we do kind of keep a checklist, not a checklist, just a list of those items, and we know that this might have to change. And we also know that, okay, if this has to be, let's call it VE'd or go a more cost-effective route, will it still work? Or is that not possible?
Exactly.
For the
so
design.
You're thinking about these. That's so cool. So these are all when you're developing the program, you're constantly thinking about optionality.
Yeah. And we have to, because to your point, everyone has a budget for various reasons. Even if technically they do have the money to spend, it might not make sense.
Right.
So,
yeah.
And actually, to your point about the hypothetical 5-year timeline of a project, or how long they would keep the property, is one of the questions we ask: is how long do you plan on holding on to this property, and what is it used for? Obviously, a house that is designed and built for anyone who's living there, plans on living there for the rest of their lives and passing it down to the kids or whatever. Very, very different from, I'm going to be here for 5 years, I'm going to sell it and try to make a profit. Then it's okay, then we need to be very mindful of the real estate value in your area, and best as we can, predict what's going to happen in 5 years and not cross a threshold, because there's a limit, right? a lot of the houses that we all see in the publications, those are extremely expensive houses. And I can guarantee you that the people building them are really not concerned with resale value. That's not the point of them,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not quite sure what happened here. We're supposed to be asking you questions.
I gotcha.
I was wondering if you could give us some background and kind of facts about your business today, like how large you guys are, how many projects, the team.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, just so we have an understanding of that.
Yeah, so we have a couple of rules. I don't know, I guess I'd call them rules, but project managers, 2 projects at a time. That's the max. I mean, we may have, like if we're helping a family with a couple of projects and we need to help, with little things, we might add that little project to the project manager. But that's rule number 1. We have an 8-mile radius with which we work in. So our projects are in an 8-mile radius so that we can get to, we can react quickly and well and plan and meet people.
In Houston?
In Houston.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. Now we are, we do have a project that's about an hour and a half away, and that's a very, very special project. So that's clearly one project manager will be handling that solely. So those are some rules. In general, as far as the company goes, we treat the building process, like the planning, the execution, closing the loops. That's one side of the business. And the money and budgeting and financial management is the other side of the business that we have a group of individuals who team up and run that section, meaning like we're both in the world of building homes that are complicated, they're complex, they change a lot, especially when we have weekly meetings with architects and designers and trades and different ways of doing things. There's a lot of pivoting, which means the budget pivots. And so, our team is tracking that and communicating that along the way. I think, you hear these horror stories about like, I got a $500,000 change order. Well, like,
yeah,
that's not acceptable. Right. So we're really, as far as, like, how the building works, right? You plan the work, you do the work, you pivot, you communicate, all that. Same thing on the budgeting part. So that's how we're sort of split up in terms of personnel. That can change based on, especially the project manager part. If we've decided that we'll take on another project or 2, then, we have relationships to where, we would bring another project manager in. What else would be important or good feedback?
I was wondering for the carpenters, fabricators, the subs, like the tiler and the framers and all those people, are a lot of those part of your team? Like they're I guess you'd call them employees, like full-time people, or do you sub out most of the work?
Yeah, it's interesting, especially in Houston. It is a subcontracting market here. So we subcontract everything. But yeah, I talk to people like in Virginia and Colorado and California where the trim carpenters are employees or painters are employees. And is there an advantage or disadvantage to that?
That was my question for you. That was literally the next question. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I have heard that one of the advantages as a GC when you sub out the work is, this is also the advantage, but the disadvantage, I think, at the same time, is that it allows them more, I guess you could say, control over the subs, because if you don't do the work well, I'm never going to use you again, kind of deal. Whereas is sometimes when someone is an employee in any profession, there can be this feeling of there's a safety net because you're an employee, so you don't really have to. You don't have to earn, your food in a sense. But we've also seen actually recently the flip side. When someone's a sub, if they don't get back to you, it's because they're not held to you for making money.
Yeah, accountable.
Yeah, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
it's common here for contractors to have in-house, like their concrete guys, their framers, and maybe like finished carpentry.
Depends on the contractor, yeah.
Depending on the contractors and the scale of their operation. But I think it also has to do with, quality control and make sure that they have a really good framer. Like if they're framing a house that's, contemporary, the framing needs to be like exquisite.
Yeah.
So if they have their one guy who's really talented, they probably just want to hold on to him or her, to make sure that they just keep repeating that quality over all of their project. Same with finished carpentry. I think it's they kind of know like which area are the most visible and the most crucial in making sure that everything else that gets applied to it will work. Because if the bones are not good, then
especially for modern stuff,
whatever you're going to put on it, you're going to have more issues down the line. So I think that's probably where the idea come from.
I think the trend is leaning toward more of the work being subbed out, though, kind of across the board. That's what I'm seeing. Yeah.
So it's interesting though, and I get it. Like we've actually launched these digital courses, and the reason I did it is just to share how we've built our trade base. And so what we've done, it addresses, I think, the some of the issues. So we have micro teams, right? So they're still subcontractors, but my electrician, HVAC person, and plumber, they've known each other for years. And so they actually operate as a little company together. So like before we start mechanicals, we all huddle up, frame is up. We're going to walk through each room and people are going to talk about where they might have conflicts with each other. Meaning, right, if we have a plumbing sewer line running here, but I've got to get some sheet metal ductwork through here. Let's, as a little micro team, figure out our solutions together so that when we start, we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
As opposed to production building where it's nobody likes each other. They just want to get in and get out. Like they don't care about anyone. They just want to do their work and get paid. And so it's been an interesting process. And I constantly, like we have scorecards on our trades and they have the same for me. Like I want that feedback.
Yeah.
Erin, you were a week late getting me a detail. That's a problem.
Right.
If they're begging for details and I'm the holdup. But then the other part is, was their bid accurate? What were they missing that they knew they were missing and they should have told us? Like nobody likes surprises. So we go through these scorecards and develop teams, and these are essentially the same teams that we use on all of our projects.
Yeah. Even if they're subs. Yeah. That's often what we find too, especially with contractors who have a bit more experience, right? They've built up. It's also an interesting thing because at some point, like the difference between someone being a sub versus an employee, I guess you would call them, it kind of doesn't matter if they're good people and everyone works well together. Then it's irrelevant in a sense. But I was speaking with a contractor recently, and they were very adamant that I only be a paper contractor. I'm not going to have any employees because it allows them more kind of authority over them. But I think if there's a level of trust, then a lot of these things kind of dissipate.
They do. And they also know how yes, they're independent. Like we're all replaceable. Let's just face it. Whether you're an employee or not, like we're replaceable. And so let's just put that on the table. Now that we've talked about that, on my way to talk to you guys, I was rushing and my sheetrocker pulled me aside and said, "Hey, did you get my message? The trim on the cabinet is level, but the ceiling has some wave to it, and there's a good half-inch gap between the ceiling and the cabinet crown, right? So there's a gap in there." And he knows, I said, "Steve, I got to go. You know my answer." I'm texting him, what'd you do? I took the sheetrock out, I shimmed the ceiling, I put the sheetrock back in, no issues, we're done.
Yep.
So there's an advantage to, over the years, like you said, they know the expectations that you guys as the architects have and us as the builders have. And that creates a relationship. Like it's built on a relationship of knowing how people think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's stronger than any contract.
I agree. Yeah, that's exactly it. I did want to talk about also that I think fairly recently you started offering owners representative services and consulting. I'm not quite sure if those are the same thing for you, which has also allowed you, as you said earlier in the conversation, to work with people outside of the 8 mile or hour and a half zone. So when did that come around? Why did you choose to do that? And how has that been going?
Okay, so that's very recent. I would say in the last 6-7 months. The reason it came about is we started with virtual consulting about a year ago. And that was really just, I get so many phone calls from all over the place. We're on Instagram. And so people either text me or call me, and I'm trying to like get back to people, but I just can't. I can't, right? Like too many.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, I've got to organize this. Like if it's something that's really important to someone, they can go to the website, they can schedule an hour with me. We can go through whatever they have going on. It could be a scenario where it's not going so well with the contractor. What do we do? It could be, hey, we just bought a piece of property. We want to develop it. What do we do? Hey, I'm looking for an architect in wherever. What do I do? Hey, I'm in, I'm in Colorado, and we want to bring some Houston subs in because the cost of work here is like, 10 times what it could be in Houston. So we're interested in bringing trades in. So we open this door and we're getting all this feedback. And what I've learned is that setting a project up well from the beginning with the right people solves 95% of these issues.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep. And so it was great information to collect and learn about. And so now, that's our approach. Like there is people get busy, like even like the best builders, the best architects, the best designers, everyone's busy, and they, human nature is like, if someone's not kicking and screaming, we have to go to the kicking and screaming people.
Right.
And so, we've talked about just alignment and keeping all of us together as we're moving forward. A lot like my family and my work, like we're aligned, we're integrated, we're moving forward. And it's as simple as, weekly communication or getting the project set up well, meaning like, hey, we bought a piece of property. We need to find the right architects for this. Architects may not be in Houston. We need to find them. So those are the clients we're working with right now. And it's been a lot of fun because there are so many talented and skilled people. And I have like, just like you guys, an expansive mindset to where I want to know the best. I want to work with the best, right? Yeah. Clients, architects, designers. And so this is one way to do it.
Yeah, interesting.
So you're sleeping even less these days then, right?
What's that?
You're sleeping even less these days, right?
You know what? You're kind of right about that. But so here's the thing though. So the kids are getting older, right? So we have, we have 3 kids in college and 2 in high school. So they're getting older, and, so there's more time to do things like this.
And they can help you with the business now, which is good.
What's funny? You're right. So the boys clean homes in the summertime.
Oh, that's great.
Yep. And I think, even our team members, their kids, they're in college running spreadsheets, and, social media is a big thing. Yeah. And so there's plenty that we need help with that they can help.
That's great.
So talking about the social media presence, because you do a very impressive job on Instagram. I don't know if you're on other platforms. I'm not on anything else except for Instagram, so I wouldn't know. But yeah, you very impressive in terms of the quality, the consistency, the content, like everything. It's great. When did you start putting out content like that, and why?
Okay, so when I would say maybe a year or two ago, to where I was actually talking. What it used to be is I've always been so fascinated when I walk into a home to watch how things are put together by the experts. And so a lot of it in the beginning was just like taking a video, but I realized people didn't like
interact.
There was, they're like, well, why are you taking a video of that? Like, I don't understand what's happening here.
Because it's cool, obviously.
Yeah,
what are you
exactly. I know. And then I think also, I think like, I always wanted other people to talk about what they were doing, but they wouldn't. So I'm like, okay, well then I'm just going to talk about this because this is super cool and I like it. And that's all it is. I literally walk into a home. I give someone my iPhone. We walk the home. We shoot a few videos. It's part of my day. It doesn't take any extra time. And it's just a matter of, sharing things. And we've found that people actually like it. They like seeing the behind the scenes.
Yeah. Well, you're super good at it for sure. I mean, I follow plenty of related accounts in construction and design and whatnot. And, not everyone is as good on camera, for better or for worse. And sometimes you can tell folks they're trying so hard to be casual, but it's just sloppy, or they're trying hard to be polished and it's too awkward, which is not necessarily their fault. It's just difficult, but you do a really good job.
Well, thank you.
It doesn't come across like authentically natural and not like awkwardly natural. Like you're pretending like, I just got my coffee and now I'm here. Like, I believe yeah, that is actually your coffee. You actually are drinking it,
It is. I'm running in. That's right. It's like, here's a camera. So, but thank you. That's good feedback. And I hope it's helpful. Not helpful, but helpful and maybe, I guess, entertaining a little bit or a little bit of an escape for people. But it's much like you doing your podcast, right? Like that's a certain level of communication and conversation flow and so you guys are super awesome at podcasting.
Thank you.
There's the magic of editing and post that we have the advantage of.
Well, we actually don't trim that much. So,
that's true. We don't trim that much.
Yeah, it takes practice.
Yeah. You do a great job.
But I'm also wondering then through the Instagram, you guys have taken off in terms of popularity for sure. Has that helped your business? Because I do know, like for plenty of architecture offices and contractors, they're wanting to know the answer to that question.
Yeah, I think for what we've seen is, when you meet someone and you're just familiar with their voice or the way they talk or whatever. And then you get more familiar with them. It's almost like in terms of the business, it's easier for people to just pick up the phone and say, hey, Erin, we're thinking about building a home. Could you catch up? And it's almost like they're already in the flow of working with each other.
Yeah.
So that's one thing we've seen. I think the other part too, which is great for, architects, designers, and builders, is to just share the product, right? Like share how you think, share what's important to you, because that helps people align with you as well, right? So like if I'm looking at a shower detail, it will be very intentional as to where I'm going to put that plumbing valve, and it's going to be, smack in the middle of a grout line centered in that shower. But that's the expectation of you or wherever you want this. But that's also my expectation. And so if that aligns with how people think, then it's easier to have conversations because they can sort of get in my head and there's less worry. And even on the front, we talked about pre-construction agreements. We're not even pricing homes and we're under contract, because I think they just know a lot more about how the business operates and how we operate.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That makes total sense. We are coming up on the hour here. This went by incredibly fast, which I knew it would, but it actually went by faster than I thought, which is a great sign.
Which is good.
So it means we'll have to continue the conversation. But the last question I have is, well, we usually ask architects like what their favorite building is. And I suppose, yeah, I'll ask you the same thing. It doesn't have to be a project you've done, but just any building out there. What would be your favorite?
It's so funny. I don't have any favorite buildings. My favorite, like, things that come up in my head is when we go out to dinner tonight, I'm going to notice like how the brick joints look, or like, is that the right color? If the name of the restaurant is on the brick and it's painted, like, is that tone? Does that feel right to me? So it's more of like the everyday moments that just like I get so excited about.
I love it. That's a fantastic answer. We're the same way for sure.
Is it hard for you?
Oh yeah. The first thing we do when we enter any space is look at the details, and if it's something is particularly if something is done well, but it's a little bit different than I would have anticipated, then it makes my day.
The worst part is when you spend like a couple of days doing drawings and models, and you dream about it, and then the next morning you look outside and you just want to like straighten everything and like chop the trees and like that's when you know you need to like.
That's a great answer.
Well, this was great. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you,
Erin.
I
love talking to you, both of you.
Yeah,
David
this was
and Marina,
great.
you guys are awesome.
Thank you so much. We'll talk soon. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this week's episode. If you like what we're doing, then please support the show. You can leave the show a review in the Apple Podcast app where we are. We're also on Spotify and YouTube. The podcast has a website, which is secondstudiopod.com. You can find us through our Office fame everywhere online. The podcast also has an Instagram, which is Second Studio Pod, and we have about 80,000 followers on there. So good following, engage in conversation, see what's up, reels, clips, quotes, work images, fun stuff like that. And what else is there?
And the hotline, 213-222-6950. You can send a text message or call and leave a voicemail. If you have guests you would want to see on the show, if you have any questions you want to ask us or anything else you want us to talk about, that's one of the good ways to reach out.
Absolutely. A lot of great guests coming up. Stay tuned. Appreciate you guys for listening. Talk soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.